that time of day for the power of one. Power of one. With Eddie Frederick. The power of one is a comprehensive approach to inspiration, motivation, great advice, and biting opinion pieces as only Eddie Frederick can deliver. The power of one. Continue to stay tuned. Turn up the power. Yeah! It's time for
the one and only
Eddie Frederick.
Welcome to the Power of One, a viable alternative to what appears to be a perpetual silly season which sits over a nation as a matter of course. The Power of One with yours truly seeks to energize you so that you can ultimately associate yourselves with right things and right itself.
Turn up the power.
Hey folks, it's me again, Eddie Frederick, a human resource development trainer and certified Caribbean trainer with over 30 years experience covering local, regional and US markets. Within recent times, I have embarked on a podcast series which is still evolving as I share regional news through Caribbean perspective and valuable motivational and self-development inspirational tidbits aimed at introducing you to a larger vision of who you really are as a person. I implore you to hit the like button and consider subscribing for some valuable insights to keep the right attitude and perspective during these times of crisis and challenge for so many of us. Why is it that the other man these days just wants to get ahead at all costs? This is so even at the expense or at grave inconvenience to others. Coexistence seemed not to exist in the vocabulary of many of our people during the last 20 years in particular. We see this getting ahead syndrome in everyday behavior on the streets in traffic, at parties or fetes, in the schoolyard among children, in the supermarkets, at the airport in the queue, in banks also, just about everywhere. This getting ahead has us feeling we're ahead of the next man, but in truth and in fact, we are operating in context of a fast train to nowhere. The energies we expend on breaking shortcuts just to move ahead of the next man may be better used when focused on a goal, which when collectively put together puts Grenada in step with true progress through an attitude of development so that we can as a nation bask in the glory of being a truly independent people. It is this getting ahead of the other man urgency that fuels the high level of dishonesty our people subscribe to. A long habit of these dishonest practices has so many of us thinking right that we have lost our moral epicenter. Employees who are told during the interview their entitlements agree wholeheartedly with the terms until they successfully complete their 90-day probationary period. For the negative in spirit who number many, they start to find fault with the salary, forgetting that they were not ambushed to take up the position and that their terms were perfectly all right at the entry stage. But what fuels this greed is the lack of an ability in many of us to live within our means. We have Fanta change in our pockets, but we want to drink Dom Perignon champagne. We have blue soap budgets, but we continue to reach instantly for iPhones, stretching ourselves out of the park. In the case of those of us who can only afford to build a certain size and style of house, we want to outdo our neighbors so much that we lay on the concrete heavy to the point where we can't manage the upkeep of the lavish spreads that we put down, and our diets suffer, leading us to a perpetual state of unwellness. Being appropriate is not part of our psyche, and so we don't care if we have to pull the devil by his tail, but we must have what we want while we forget our needs. The level of dishonesty we operate with as a people is much too high for this small nation to withstand. On one hand, Grenada, known to many as the region's best-kept secret, does not have enough progressive thinking people, and on the other hand, she has too many of one kind, the non-progressive. How do we change that paradigm? Education and public awareness has to be the order of the day. This education and awareness must come from those of us who are not status-oriented and must not come from any form of authority whose very members are divisive and epitomize the getting ahead at all cost syndrome. Too often we see the abject selfishness around us with all its crippling effects and can't seem to reconcile it with the miserable reality we have been living since 7th February 1974. Many of my age group may not be happy with my pungent view of us, but to a great extent, we have failed this nation. Look at how miserably we have failed to be the effective change agents that we were called upon to be. Many of us are instead active participants in wealth accumulation activities which push the envelope of honesty. Many of us are so consumed by getting ahead that we do not care whether things around us crumble in the department of dishonesty and other intricate values which make for a sound society that makes sense and can stand the test of time. Many of us are still programmed to judge the progress of others by the things that they were able to accumulate as against the values they stand for. Surely, Grenada could have been further along had we a different focus. How many of us have actually gone the route of effective leadership, willing to stand and be counted as a national standing for something? Look at our political landscape. Look at our religious landscape. Look at our leadership landscape, period. We are in a bad way, thanks to the negligence of people my vintage. Look at how we have deserted the political landscape to the point where we ourselves complain about the level of people we have left it for. Yet for all, we cozy up to them instead of acting otherwise. If we show them disdain, they will know their place. If only we did not possess this getting ahead of the other man syndrome, we would have stuck out for equity in our society rather than allow our greed to help vaporize our hard-earned savings through SGL, Capital Bank, Clico, and British American. In all, we exposed just under $1 billion in liabilities to Clico and British American alone. And I'm talking about the entire OECS here. While we are focused on so many things that don't matter, our nation is spiraling downwards. Our people are deteriorating in cultural expressions and general behavior to the point where social graces seem to have all gone out the window. I recall speaking with a few principals of schools, both of the primary and secondary levels, who were singing the same tune about behavioral expressions of our children, notwithstanding how much some parents try to bring up their children properly. Once they go to the school and mix with their poorly socialized peers, they lose the zeal to remain attached to the values which they know, thus trading them for undesirable behavior. The foregoing and following are not meant to bash our youth because, as I always maintain, what we identify in them as things we don't like are rarely what they usually show us of ourselves. The undesirable behaviors of our young people must have come from somewhere, the same place where they acquire them. If we were better examples, following laws without a query and living orderly lives, our children would follow suit as they truly live what they learn. You should see their new style of partying. The music has to be changed while the song is barely into its first verse. The DJ has to shout for the entire night. The doggy-styled whining, which they call 6:30, without the climax, as if to mimic sex, notwithstanding who is looking. Oh boy, these are only small bits of the progressive decline from my day to now. Hey, let's get one thing straight. Our age group was no prude. We had our fair share of decadence, but the areas of holding back because of the regard we had for our elders prevented us from going overboard. Today's generation do not see the need to exhibit a familiarity with respect for limit. That is dangerous. I recall us being inclined to drink alcohol while growing up in our late teens, but we had the presence of mind to hold back, as we did not wish to bear any sign of intoxication to our parents or guardians. That helped to limit us while steering us on the straight and narrow. Now there seems to be no limit or even regard for tomorrow. Look at our young men who glorify gangsterism and its attendant behavior, notwithstanding their various backgrounds and how much their parents would have tried with them. Even without alcohol in their system, they look like fit candidates for the lockup, far less when the extreme consumption of alcohol is put on top of that. Folks, the next generation is in crisis. And this is as a result of the negligence of our generation. We, the parents, collectively have failed our children. Yet for all, when we are together socializing, we are decrying their diverse and mostly deviant expressions. While some of us are busy getting ahead of the other, regardless of the cost, we neglect to be good mothers and fathers to our children, especially our boys. It is only natural that they will glorify our behavior, which we ourselves sometimes sit and criticize in others, forgetting or rather ignoring the important fact that it is so we are for ourselves. Our young girl children do not have a good crop of young men to pick from, and the converse is also applicable. Our little and mostly young population is indeed in crisis. There is some hope yet for all, as there is a limited few adults who have been trying, and although it is fashionable for most if not all of our children to experiment one way or the other, those of that ilk have a foundation to fall back on. The old biblical truism, train up a child the way he should go, and when he gets old he will never depart from it, applies. More of us have to pay close attention to the old order of bringing up our children so that they can be introduced from early to what is right and proper. All of this shared here today have been with our best interests at heart. We must be the change we hope to see. Grenada is too lovely for our people to be programmed to bounce as low as we bounce. As a matter of course, our people need to step it up in order to be the right fit for the sophisticated yet serene atmosphere we effortlessly live with on a daily basis. Remember, we give life to the place we live. Let us therefore give Grenada a deservedly higher level life. Again, I implore you to hit the like button and consider subscribing for some valuable insights to keep the right attitude and perspective during these times of crisis and challenge for so many of us, and become enlightened through proper focus to your unlimited possibilities.
A power of one, with Frederick. The Power of One is a comprehensive approach to inspiration, motivation, great advice, and biting opinion pieces as only Eddie Frederick can deliver. The Power of One.
As I take my leave, I encourage you to find something you can be passionate about, because when you love what you do, you will never work a day in your life.
Here is where we wrap it up for today. The Power of One. The Power of One with Eddie Frederick. So long.